Well, let's talk about. I mean, there's a shock factor when you pick this thing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's
There's
just no way around it. I mean, you pick it up and you're like,
because it's the same size. Like it's not.
It's
when
deceiving.
You think, yeah, it's like for what other people have used in the past, it's a very similar size. And you pick it up, your body's trained to think it's 12 pounds, 11 pounds.
Yeah.
It's half the weight of that, basically.
yeah.
Yeah, the actual weight without the seat straps and everything, it weighs right at about.
Lights.
Follow the trail.
Ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
Trail Cam Radio from the guys at Exodus.
All right, we're live in Beast Gear Studio. How's the echo?
It's not.
I mean,
I hear it, but I don't know what it's going to turn out like. I think it's.
Okay, I mean it's the environment we're in, so
Yeah,
okay.
it's a warehouse.
Well, yeah, indeed a
There's
warehouse.
Lots of space.
Yeah, we have Mario and Dan here. Thanks for inviting us into studio here, or I guess warehouse. Dan, thanks for recording Whitetail Cribs with us.
Yeah, no problem.
We didn't get to hear it in action, so I'm excited to check it
There's
out.
some
afterward.
suspense there.
There really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We rolled up and we're like, are we going to get a physical or something? 'Cause
Dan didn't have rubber gloves on. Just to be
right.
clear.
Yeah. And so you walk in and it's a cabinet shop, and then back there is like a taxidermy layer, and then all the deer that you've shot over the years. And so very excited to see that. Highly requested. We've done how many Whitetail Cribs now?
90?
Yeah.
80, 90? Something like
Highly requested. So
that? Yeah.
the people thank you. Anyways, so yeah, we wanted to talk all about your guys' most recent launch and what you guys have going on here. First time I've laid hands on the stand. It is cool. It is awesome, to say the least. So if you want to kind of give us a little bit of the development history and a little bit what you guys have here today.
You want to start, Dan? Go ahead.
Basically, I've always been a mobile guy from way back before anybody knew what mobile was. And equipment's never been made for mobile people. So I would get by with the stands I had and stuff, but there's always issues that bothered me. And meanwhile, my career is R&D, building and inventing things and working with engineering to make mechanical designs. So I see the flaws and I see how to fix it, and not necessarily flaws, but I see how to make things better for a mobile person, per se, right? Or to make things work better. So I always wanted to make my own stand. And at the same time, Mario was working with me, and we were talking about this, and we got together on it. And we decided to just build our own stands and sticks. And at first, it was just we were going to build our own. And we were kind of, thumb our noses at the industry that, that wouldn't conform. But it seems like as soon as you start building it, everybody wants to be you and
Right.
wants to conform to you. They wouldn't conform when you had suggestions.
Yeah.
But anywho, we got done building the stuff. Mario was really urging me that this stuff really needs to be offered to the public, not just to make money, but more to make it available to people. And if we want it, other people are going to want it, and give them the opportunity to use it if they want to.
Right.
It sounded like a great idea, and it was. It was a lot bigger undertaking than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And it was a huge project.
And you guys have been running a similar, I guess, setup for a few years before it turned into like, hey, hunting beast tech, let's.
Yeah. I think, well, part of some of the more interesting part of the story is how Dan and I met. We happened to be working for the same company in the same building. So the way that I would enter in to go to work would take me through the R&D area, the R&D machining area where Dan worked. So I heard through the grapevine that Dan was a really good whitetail hunter. And I had been browsing around on the Hunting Beast site that Dan ran for a while. So typically every morning, Dan gets, as you guys know, he gets into work about 2 a.m. So he would already be there for a while. But we would start having conversations about hunting, primarily around, tactics, techniques, what you were doing. And Dan's a tinkerer. So you'd come over to Dan's work table and you'd always have a story to tell, and you'd always be working on something, obviously, for his primary job, but he'd be tinkering with other things because he's been involved in manufacturing these types of products for many years. So it first started out just kind of me stalking Dan and trying to convince him to come out and hunt a couple pieces of property with me that I had been hunting. And finally, I convinced Dan to come out hunting with me. He begrudgingly agreed, not so begrudgingly, but, and probably, I don't know, it was like the 5th or 6th hunt in. It was kind of a funny hunt because we went to this big swamp out on public land, and I've probably told this story before, but it's still a funny story. We show up at the parking lot, and Dan's kind of in a rush. We're getting done with work, and we're driving out there, and show up in the parking lot. I got all my stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna go back about 2 miles. We got to go through these cattails and swamps. There's going to be a main island there. Then you got to wrap around the back side of it. We've got, a southwest wind, and you want to set up right in this spot." But it's a walk to get there. You got to be prepared for it. So we had all of our mobile gear, traditional setup that most people run. And back then, really the primary company that was running stuff was Lone Wolf. You had Lone Wolf sticks and all that gear set up. So we're unpacking all of our gear, and Dan's like, I forgot my release. So he looks at me, and I think you look at this from the perspective of, a hunter that's moving into this, into this transition. He looks at me and he goes, I could drive back home and try to come back, but why don't you just go in there alone? So I'm sitting there in my mind thinking, all right, I got 2 miles to walk through these cattails, navigate through there, get to this island, sneak around the backside. I wasn't going to say no, right? He was kind of throwing down the gauntlet. Like, are you man enough to walk back here alone? I'm going to go hunt this other spot that's down the road. You'll be fine. So that was kind of, I consider that one of the maiden voyages. He's like, and keep your bow ready, because as you're sneaking through there, stuff might, you might get on a buck that'll pop up. That walk, I ended up seeing a doe that night. Didn't see any bucks. Found out later after talking to Dan and we reviewed the map that I actually set up not right in the exact spot I should have. Not really even close, actually.
Right, kind of like the other side of the island.
But it was funny because, so literally, I could see the horizon of the island as I was walking through these cattails, and that just slowly went away, and then I started navigating by compass and by GPS. I get to the edge of this island, and I'm soaked with sweat. It's hot. It was early in the season. I think it was the first week. It was first week of the season, the opener. And, I'm like, all right, so now I got to try to find this spot. I remember walking across the edge of the island and started picking up sign and coming across a raccoon that was like twitching on the ground, half dead. I was thinking to myself,
You had to walk out there too.
like, I hope this isn't an omen of what's to come for myself later on that night. But it ended up being a cool hunt. I mean, it was an adventure, right? Even though I didn't see a shooter buck or anything that night, walking back out of there, I got back to the truck at probably 9:30 that night, tired, sore, dehydrated. And I remember calling Dan on the phone, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I walking out of here tonight, I did something that most grown men wouldn't want to do, because they just, half the time you're dragging all your equipment through there, and coming out of there, you want it to be as streamlined as possible with all your gear, because you're literally walking through dogwood and cattails. It's super tight. Anyone who's hunted like this and gone back to those spots has been in those situations. And really from there, we started doing a lot more hunting together. And then through conversations, every morning when we'd see each other, tinkering, the first idea that came up was like, hey, what can we do with these sticks to make them a lot lighter? What changes and tweaks can we make to them that will suit our needs as we're hunting? And that's really where you think about this double step, and having no moving parts was one of the kind of the first ideas that spawned from that relationship that we built. Was like, we're having issues with the stuff we were using. It was working, but there were failure points and there were annoyances. And it was like, how can we make something that'll take care of those failure points and those annoyances? And really the no moving parts and the double step kind of spawned from there.
Yeah, if you think about how the folding steps just continually get looser because they pivot on a nut, and you're constantly tightening them. And then eventually the nut's worn out. You got to replace the nut, and no doubt they fail when you're in the field, you know. And we're just trying to come up with something that will not fail. And you know, me, I'm like a percentage guy. And I want to take away any percentage of anything happening. When I think back of all the deer that got away from me, it was always some little thing that could have been fixed.
Right.
That went wrong, you know. And I just try to fix everything. And getting rid of those moving parts is huge, because not only does that loosen up and get looser and then cause the hole to open up, and it starts causing noises, it starts causing creaks, and when you're solid, it don't make noise.
Right.
You know. Another thing that you didn't mention was that, you know, you get your, we're trying to achieve, like after we came up with that idea, was the step distance, max step distance, without having too much tube, you know. So if you go 3, I mean, you're just adding
Right.
weight for no reason. So having the 2-step thing, you know, and then just taking all the weight out of there.
And that again was interesting, because I'm a lot shorter than Dan. And if you've ever followed Dan in the woods when he strides over stuff, it's quite interesting, because you end up jogging behind him and jumping over logs. But yeah, the initial versions of these were actually longer. There's longer versions that were longer than 24 inches between the 2-step distance. And obviously with ASTM standards, you know, this has to be an 18 to 18 inch distance in here to pass testing. So we eventually landed, we had a longer, you know, our longer 24-inch stick, and then this is a 20-inch model where this is 18 inches between here. The other feature that we're trying to solve for is a lot of times when you're hunting on these fringes, and Dan, you know, teaches this a lot in his seminars and what he's shared, you know, over the years on the internet, is these fringes, these changes in topography, you know, where you're going from cattails or dogwood to hardwoods, or you're going from swamp grass to hardwoods, or any sort of fringe. There's not a lot of really good mature trees. And most recently, within the last 5 to 10 years, with emerald ash borer coming in, you're seeing a ton of ash die off all over the place. I mean, every swamp in Wisconsin, I'm sure you guys see it where you're from, everything's dead. So you end up getting into either dead or very small, immature trees that are growing at an angle towards the light.
Yeah.
So those situations, you know, you end up with a stick that's tilted.
Yep.
You end up having to secure to a smaller tree, or a tree that's not necessarily maybe fit to climb, but it's the tree you got to be in.
Well, you got to hunt deer, not trees.
Right.
You know, and the deer are on the edges, and that's all there is to it. I mean, the tree I shot my deer out of last year is this big around.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, and that's the case a lot of the time.
So one of the other design features was angling this step, and you'll see this that way when it's on a canter, when you're tilting it, you're still able to get a full foot and flat on here. And it's a little nuance that a lot of people might not notice, but that's the reason why it was designed like that.
I've ran those sticks for 2 years. So I bought a set when you guys first launched those a couple years ago. And the thing that I've been most impressed with is the damn standoffs. Like those things, doesn't matter if the tree's on a canter, leaned away from you, you know, angled, your stick's cockeyed. When those things bite, like they're not moving. And I don't run buckles. I use a rope mod. So there's more, I guess, slack in there before the stick actually tightens down. But even with a rope mod, like that's the most solid piece of climbing equipment that I've ever used. And we've used some high-end stuff, considerably high-end stuff, like high-end as what was available, you know, at that time.
Right.
And the reason that that's sticking like that is because of the background we have in manufacturing and making products like that. So I don't just make a pattern and put it on a stick like that. Now you look at the competitors, and they got straight line, you know, with angles.
Sure.
And what we did was we took a computer model, made up the different size trees we're going to hunt out of, and then we put the points on the different diameters where they'd meet, and figured out where those would be, and then figured out how we can get the best, you know, depth of it without, you know, having tips that break off in trees or whatever. And then we went out and field tested. Then we tweak it. Then we go back to the computer, and we literally, I mean, what do we spend 2 years making a stick? Where to the average guy, it looks simple.
Yeah.
And then the average guy, and we knew this going in. They're going to look at that and go, well, it's too expensive. It's too this, it's too that, and I can just go buy this other stick. But if you use it, if a buddy of yours has it, you're buying it.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that grips a tree like that.
Nope. And it doesn't, to what Mario was saying, you could climb a 2-3 inch diameter tree, or you can get on a giant cottonwood, and it's still gonna.
Well, you think about, I'm sneaking into deer that are bedded right in front of me. Now, if a guy doesn't hunt like that, he doesn't get it, and he probably doesn't need this stuff. But I'm hunting where a buck is bedded 75 yards in front of me. I can't make any mistakes. I do not want to be side profiled on a tree when I'm out in a marsh and that deer's looking in my direction. So I'll be going up a tree like this on the side.
Yeah, using it as a blocker. Yeah.
And if you use a straight line, on your climbing stick, it will roll around that tree, guaranteed. It'll just slide around. That won't.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to go up that tree sideways if you want to.
Yeah, and you'll see. I mean, obviously, back in 2017 when we created these and launched these, there really weren't any standoffs that were using an aggressive tooth pattern like this, or that were patterning these teeth so that they'd make multiple contact points with the tree, both for small diameter trees and larger diameters.
Yeah.
Now you'll see, obviously there's a lot of chatter online about boot depth. You'll see a bunch of reviews done on what's the boot depth from the step to the tree, and there's variances in these antler bracket depths and all that. As Dan mentioned, all that stuff as we were developing these was being field tested each day that we were messing with it, so that this distance between where it attaches to the stick and where it latches onto the tree was for what we were doing, and the type of boots that we were wearing was the optimal distance for most of the trees that we were going in. And then, really, this being aggressive and Dan's creativity as he modeled this up, he wanted it to look like a buck bracket.
I think that's cool. Matches the logo.
Yeah, and that sort of evolved and came together all at the same time, because I remember the initial drawings were really just on a piece of paper of this design, and then as this started coming together, that's where we transformed it into the logo.
I remember
as well.
the papers were sitting in front of us and we were discussing some stuff we were working on with it, and Mario picking it up and having a puzzled look on his face and going, "That's the logo right there. That's the logo."
Some other more nuanced features that, again, some of this stuff, other people that have reviewed the multitude of sticks that are out there now in the market that are using similar technologies and features. I mean, you'll see a lot of sticks that have one bolt attachment here onto this. Again, through our designs and the testing that we did, we had that model. We had that version for a while. We tested it. The reason why we went to this model with this T-shape and a slot is, again, the whole concept of, if you're using this as a day in, day out hunter and you're putting wear and tear on these over and over and over again, in our testing and what we came across, the single bolt model moved. It moved, and over time, this tolerance would loosen, it would develop noise. And again, can you maintain it? Can you tighten it? Can you replace bolts? You can do all that stuff. But our thought was, why? Why do we want to do that? We want to set it. We want our equipment to be ready to go when you get off of work and you're like, I got 2 hours to get out there and hunt, and that's what I want to do. I want my gear to be reliable. And so that's why this feature is in there, where it locks this into place. This becomes a completely monolithic structure locking together with absolutely no movement.
That was one of the other things I noticed, just sitting in the garage and building these things after I had got them, how tight those tolerances are. I mean, they're fit snug. Like they're
a lot of other companies are just using a piece of tubing.
Yeah.
We're making the tubing.
Right.
We're extruding that. We have our own mold for that, so it's the exact size we want it to be. And then we're machining the parts to a fit.
Yeah. I think that's, when you look at there's a lot of products and there's a lot of companies that launch products just to have new stuff for marketing buzz. But when you look at something that, I guess, solves a problem, you can almost think about, okay, what brains were behind this? Because they're engineering problems out of the equation. They're taking their minds and using that to take that problem out of the equation, where you then have, the equation becomes much, much smaller. So you take the mechanical failures out. Now it's you have the human element, right?
Right.
Which you can never get away from. But
What you have here is you have a unique situation where you have guys that hunt mobilely and are successful at it and are killing lots of big bucks doing it, as in me and Mario, right? And we have that background in the manufacturing too, where your average person selling product is hunting an 800-acre lease.
Right.
You know what I mean? Hunting tame deer. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying, how can they know how to fix the problems for the public land guy that's going out there
Right.
mobile?
Right. Yeah, they can't really.
Right.
Yeah, they can't.
All they can do is copy what's already out there.
Yeah.
Everything that when I came in here, I was like a kid in a candy store, putting my hands on everything. Everything is so solid. That's the one word I would use to describe this. Everything is solid. Grabbing on the stand, it's extremely light, but solid.
There's a balance. I mean, you see the industry gravitate towards one thing. You know, like these guys making a stand or a stick or something, they will just be like, well, I can beat your weight. Now, when we came out, we were the lightest stuff out there. We could have made the stuff lighter, but at what cost?
Right.
You know what I mean? Now you see people making stuff light by putting a rivet in it or something, or using a type of material that'll break down in weather, and or making the platform so small you couldn't really kill a deer out of it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a meet in the middle. You know,
Still has to be
and I'm not going to
functionable,
chase.
right?
I'm not going to chase those guys, but that's what they're doing is they're chasing everybody.
Yeah. It's we see that a lot in the camera side. Like there's just this made up specification sheet, right? And they're building products on specification, not functionality. And that's where the difference between the two lies.
Yeah, and I think as times change and as environments change that you're hunting in or different situations that you get in, then I think the greatest products get spawned out of those situations where you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to solve a real human problem that exists in something that someone's trying to do. So a lot of times we just tell that story when people ask us like why you did this a certain way. And now this has been around for 5-6 years now, and there's a number of other competitors out there that are producing sticks. You know, what really differentiates them? You know, I always kind of like to say to people, you know, look at the features that are on the sticks, look generally at what people are doing, and you'll see, you know, a lot of competitors that came out right away, they still had collapsible models. People were saying, well, we want to be collapsible, real low profile. And now just this year, you know, 3 or 4 of those competitors came out with fixed double steps. It's almost like the people have spoken. The people have tried these other scenarios in the types of hunts that they're doing, and they're not quite working for them. Similar to what happened to Dan and I when we were using that other equipment that was made in a different way, and it wasn't quite working for us. So that's why we went to this setup. And, you know, so I think all industries do that. They sort of trend towards what the consumer market or what the people that are actually using it need to be the most efficient.
Sure.
So we'll continue to have tweaks. We got some more tricks in our bag that'll be coming out. But yeah, the stick was what really started everything.
What's been the most rewarding thing from identifying the problem, developing the product, and releasing it to the world? What's been the most rewarding thing for either the stick or the stand?
I think helping people. That's my thing. Is it's really not about making money. We wanted to make a better product for people, and I think the success stories I'm getting back of people really happy with their products and stuff is a cool thing. That's what everything I've been doing all along is to help people be better hunters, not just in the tree stand market, but everything I do. And not only just to make people better hunters, but to make them better people. That's kind of my focus since the start of like becoming a public person. And it doesn't change with the stands. I mean, we'd like to do this for a living and continue going on, but that isn't the main focus. Isn't to make money. It's to make products that will help people and keep them safe while they're hunting.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. The most rewarding thing is listening to those stories, or when I can relate to people asking questions when they're first learning and they're first embarking on starting to hunt mobile or starting to learn different things from what they were taught when they were young. and sharing the things that, Dan taught me and I've learned from guys like Joe and a lot of other Hunting Beast members, and now really the greater audience of all the people that are doing this online. You get to take that, someone comes to you and they're like, well, what do you think about this? And what if I set up this way and there's this wind? And you share that with them, and then they have success. And then they come back and say, man, I wouldn't have been able to do this without the advice that you gave, when really it's the advice that I gave from the 3 people that I took advice from here and there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the rewarding part. And producing these products to kind of supplement that and really help people execute on it is kind of like the icing on the cake for the whole situation. We get a lot of people and there's a lot of people that'll message us and say, hey, these sticks are awesome, or now with the stand they're saying it's awesome and I can't wait to get out there and shoot the buck of a lifetime with these, or I was able to get into this tree that I was never able to get into before and it got me on this deer. And those are the type of stories, that's the experience that Dan and I had when we first started using this stuff. And that's kind of that experience we were trying to recreate for ourselves every time that we went out.
So obviously we manufacture products. You guys manufacture products. How hard is it to go from sitting at the kitchen table with the scratch paper of designs to actually having something that is helping people hunt safer, smarter, and better?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of competitors. I'm sure there's someone, I could do that. That doesn't look that hard.
Well, for me, I think a lot of people design things just like you said. They sit around and try to think of things to design. How am I going to get rich today? What am I going to design? How can I make something in this industry? Where we're not doing that. So, it comes a little more natural to me, literally, and I believe to Mario too, because, and we had this conversation when we started. I said, you do not want to be making products to please people. Make something you believe in and you want, and fix a problem. If you're not fixing a problem, if you're just making something like everybody else. So for us, really, we're saying, okay, I have an issue. My button crushes all the time. What can I do about that? Should I make it out of aluminum? Put some holes around it, or should I make it out of really hard plastic? Experiment with some stuff. You find a way to make it work. You have a problem. You get a little creak in here. This is loosening up. What can we do? What kind of products can we use? What kind of materials are they using in the washers? That's not working. People wouldn't believe what goes into just making the washers on this thing. And it's not something we put out there real readily, because then everybody will do it. But we built the stand in a way, and the sticks in a way, when somebody uses it, they'll know.
Right.
And we have a slow roll thing. We set it with the sticks, and it was spot on. That people aren't going to buy it right away because of the price, because of what it's going to cost us to manufacture it, and what we're going to have to sell it for because of that manufacturing cost. But once it gets into people's hands, reviews get out there, and people touch it, it's going to be game over. And it is with the sticks. And now it's going to be the same thing with the stand as people start using it and seeing the differences between the competitors and ours.
Let's transition into the stand a little bit. The sticks have been around for a few years. The stand, you guys just started shipping a month or two ago. I've been seeing stiff social pages all over the place going crazy with UPS tracking numbers. Package showed up on the front porch. Guys are, doing unboxing videos. There's a lot of anticipation around the stand. It's something that you've been talking about personally throughout the forum and the different Hunting Beast Facebook pages. And it's like, when's the stand coming? When's the stand coming? There's been a lot of anticipation from the consumer side where this thing was going to be available, and it's finally here. And I think, let's just break it down. Talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think with the stand, and to wind back a little bit about ideas and business and getting into this, obviously you guys do this same thing. Some people start with a little bit of advantage because they have experience. They might have ran a business before, or they lean on associates that have. My recommendation that anyone's getting into this arena with any product or selling, use those resources. Lean on people that have specific, verticals of talent, whether it be distribution, packaging, manufacturing context, material context, anything like that, and keep an open mind. There are multiple things that we learned along the way from, protecting your intellectual property about what you say publicly versus what you don't say publicly. Things like, the process of you can take a product and decide you want to manufacture it. The one cool thing about Dan is that a week and sometimes a day doesn't go by where he doesn't present another idea of something that we should create that solves a problem. That's how his mind works. And we kind of counterbalance each other well, because I'm like the curmudgeon pessimist who's like, well, if we did that, Dan, we would have to account for this, this, and this. And then Dan will be like, but wait, you got to think of it this other way. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, and then, so there's a balance there, right? Because you could have the greatest idea in the world, but, if it costs $100,000 to manufacture one of them, you're never going to get it off the ground. It's not. So there's got to be a balance between what you can actually bring to market and what that idea is. So, with the stand, my first introduction to the stand platform, and this whole idea was through those real early initial conversations with Dan. This idea was one of those daily ideas that was brewing in his head. It was a piece of paper that was sitting on his workbench that was sketched out, and where he was saying to himself, I could make. This is what's out there now. I've been involved with various companies that have been doing these other types of stands. I think I can make something that's lighter, stronger, more adaptable, and really this is the process by which I'm going to go about doing it. And he spent I can't even fathom how many hours and hours, on a machine turning center with some of the early prototypes, figuring out how this model and how this design would come together. And then, from there, we drew in the context that we had from an engineering capacity to an intellectual property capacity to start getting things in motion all at the same time so we could protect the idea and both manufacture it. But there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of learning in this process.
The first platform that I made that I really liked, and I know you really liked, we'd probably have to charge $1,000 for a stand if we were making this platform. I had machine deer tracks into it.
We actually should have grabbed that thing and brought it out here because, it's sitting in back. But, it's got machine deer tracks in here, and it's all,
the very first one, I had an antler rack for.
I think I remember seeing that. Was that in some videos?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, he had, there was injection lubricated washers on all the fittings. It was, and this is that balance, right? So you have the mad scientist, and he's like, look at this thing. And then, we're sitting down. I'm like, okay. Then as you go through the process, you're figuring out all your designs and your parts list, and you're like, okay, this will cost like $5,000.
Mario's always the buzz killer. He's always like, dude, nobody's going to spend $5,000 on a tree stand.
So, that's sort of the process it goes through. But I think anyone, a lot of ups and downs. But to get to this point and now have a clean process for manufacturing and supplying and having that. And then really, being able to assemble these daily and get them out the door is pretty exciting. I think from a feature standpoint on this, if you want to talk feature-wise, the platform itself, really the width of this and the length of this kind of followed that same solve a problem path. How do we balance between size and space for someone that's hunting in these type of scenarios and environments, as well as allow for, okay, you've got this type of manufacturing processes that are in place, machining, water jetting, laser cutting, all these processes by which this could be done, potentially extruding. What are all the options that we could research to do this platform? And that factored into the end design of this, of what this stand looked like. And we were fortunate. We have a lot of contacts in engineering, so we had guys that all along the way were helping us with modeling and designing, because Dan has a lot of contacts with the people that he works with.
Well, let's talk about, there's a shock factor when you pick this thing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just no way around it. You pick it up and you're like,
Because it's the same size. Like, it's not.
It's
when
deceiving.
You think, yeah, it's like, for what other people have used in the past, it's a very similar size. And you pick it up, your body's trained to think it's 12 pounds, 11 pounds.
Yeah.
It's half the weight of that, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, lugging the traditional setup that we had 5-10 years ago, right? And Dan's, if we're all physical guys, like, you know, you work out, you're in shape, you're up for a challenge. Holding this thing in my hand now and setting the stand, I mean, I can literally be strapped in, lineman's belt on my top stick, and I have one finger on it while I'm putting it around a tree. And it doesn't seem like, you know, people are like, well, you know, why does that make a difference, or what's the big deal there? When you're in close proximity, and I'm sure, I know Joe's sitting over there, and I know he's like this, and Dan's like this too, is that anyone who does this, they have a certain amount of like OCD, or sort of, you know, they have a process.
Yeah.
And they get to the bottom of that tree, and they're step by step following that process. I mean, if you think about the sticks, how they vertically stack and why they stack loosely, we get a lot of questions on that. The reason is so you could, there's no clicking, no pulling. It's just, they're there, they're set on each other, you slowly bring it off, you get it onto the tree. And the same with when you're up at the top of the tree. If I'm just on a horizon and I'm looking down into that marsh, or I'm on that rise, or whatever I'm trying to cover from where that deer might be bedded or where that bedding area is, I want to make as little movement as possible. And I want it to be as least labor intensive as it can be to place that stand in a tree.
Yeah, I'm literally going up the back of the tree, because a lot of times I'm hunting open areas because that's where the bucks are. They're not where the trees are, where people hunt. Mm-hmm. And I'll go up the back of the tree so the buck has to look through the tree at me, and I'll climb up the tree, and I'll reach around the tree real slowly, set the stand up, and then kind of ease along the tree and slide into it. Because you don't know if there's an eyeball getting through that dogwood.
Right.
Or, you know, so you got to be as motionless as possible getting into that stand. You know, and if you got something that weighs 25 pounds and you're trying to whip it around that tree, you're going to be prone to make noises. You're going to be prone to be strained and moving things around and trying to get that belt attached.
It's just cumbersome.
Yeah, well, not only that, but you look at, you know, the average guy, your average mobile hunter. He's, you know, working 40 hours a week. He's taking X amount of days off, whether he's on a rut trip or whatever. And you start, you know, setting up, tearing down, setting up, and you do that twice a day, sometimes over 4, 5, 6, 7 days. The third day, like, I don't care who you are. Like, they consider me the hardo in the office. Like, it starts to wear you out physically, mentally. You start slipping up. You start making mistakes, and that one chance, like, that could be it.
Yeah.
So let me tell you a story, since he got to tell a story.
Okay, sure. Fair.
So one of the last hunts that I did that really pushed me towards going this route and getting this stuff manufactured was with Mario. You got to remember, I hunt almost every day. And I was using a lone wolf and 5 sticks. I use 5 sticks now. I used 5 sticks then. Usually don't use them, but if I need it, I want it along. You know, that 5th one. So I just had those factory straps, because that's what I like, because I don't like something big up there as a profile, right? So going in and out with that stuff in early season, I mean, it strains your shoulders, because that's a lot of weight, 5 sticks in a large cast platform. So we went on a hunt where we figured out this area, and we hadn't hunted it before, and it was 2 miles from where we parked the truck. And we had to navigate back there and find our way back there through dense swamp. I mean, sure, we went across some land masses, but we had to cross a creek, go into unfamiliar territory through thick stuff, and go to places that we found on a map. It was a long haul back there. Mario set up in one spot, I set up in another spot, and I ended up shooting a buck. It was a work night, too. So we're out there at dark, 2 miles back. This is the first time back there. Never navigated in the dark back there. And it took us a while to find it. There wasn't a good blood trail. I hit it good, but it just didn't bleed. Had a lot of fat on it. And it went even further. So we had to drag that buck out and all our stuff out. And now here we're sitting with all this equipment, this heavy equipment and stuff, and we're 2 miles back. So first thing we do is called some friends, meet us at the parking lot. Then we carried our stands and gear all the way back. Then we come all the way back out there, get the deer, drag the deer all the way back out. And when we get lost like 2 times,
Yeah.
Even with the compass, we were walking in circles. You know what, we put on like 10 miles that night. By the time we get that truck,
Yeah,
that
'cause
deer
2,
Not an
parked
easy
in-
10 miles.
6,
Yeah.
8. It was easily 8 to 10. Yeah.
So by the time we had that deer packed in the truck, it was sunrise. I was working like an hour later,
That's yeah.
and my arms and body were killing me from that stand. And that's hunts that we go through. I mean, if other people don't do that, maybe they don't need this stuff. But go through a season of putting that on your back and hunting every day and hunting, even if you go on a road trip and you hunt for a week and you're putting up a stand and taking it down every time,
Adds up.
it adds up. I mean, it'll strain you. And if you get burnt out and if you get stressed, you might not realize this, but it's going to impact your hunt. One way or another. I mean, you're going to get tired. You're going to sit at camp longer. You're not going to scout as much. You're not going to work as hard. You're going to get aggravated. You know, you're going to be arguing with your buddies if you're sore. To me, I mean, just making the equipment lighter, just that one little aspect, and that's a tiny bit of what this stand does. But that one little aspect is worth it.
So let's talk about some of the, I guess, specifications of the like platform size, foot space, weight. There's a couple other questions I want to ask, but I'll let you guys get into it a little bit. And
What's the advertised weight? 7 pounds, I think. No.
I got 6.8 on here on the website.
Yeah.
I think
Hold up.
it's
It's
6.8.
under. Yeah. Yeah, the actual weight without the seat straps and everything, it weighs right at about 7
Yeah,
with all of it together.
and that's the real weight.
Right.
Yeah, you can weigh that on a scale and it'll actually weigh that. There's no shenanigans going on there with
It's
it.
not like it's 7.8 pounds here, but when you get it home, it'll be 20 pounds.
well, one of the things that kind of outside of the weight that jumps out at me, it's just the length and the foot room you have on this platform. A lot of, like you said, a lot of
They cut them too short.
yeah, they're just so worried about the weight and the profile of the stand. Like, there's no, like, we all know a lot of times, like, it doesn't happen the way we have it drawn up. Like, it's just the reality of deer hunting. Sometimes it does, and it's great, but oftentimes you're contorting yourself and you need to shuffle your feet around. And that presents, like, if you're on a tiny ass, I got giant feet, like 13 size boots. So that's always something that's running through my head, but this is.
That's part of the comfort thing. I mean, when you design a stand, I mean, there's a certain height you want to be. I mean, a lot of people try to cheat on weight and stuff and profile by making that shorter.
Yes.
If your knees are above your waist, your legs are going to go numb. Mm-hmm. They need to be like level or below. And then if you're getting sore, then it's a matter of adjusting this on a down pinch, because if this is up a little bit, it'll pinch off your sciatic nerve, and that's what makes you sore in these seats. Usually when somebody says that they can't sit in a seat like this for a long time, it's because they don't know how to adjust it. It just has to be so that this isn't pitching off that muscle. But in the same regard, when you're talking about this platform, if you're shoving your feet back and you got that angle going with your legs because you ain't got no room for your feet out here, that's going to shut off those muscles too, and you're going to get sore. So you need that platform, especially for a bigger guy with big feet, and I'm a size 13. You know, so I need to have my feet out here straight up, and I have this pitched down a little bit, and I can sit on that all day.
Right.
You took that platform back to here, and my knees are pitched. I couldn't sit on it that long.
Right.
Yeah, and other things that go into the design of it with allowing for a longer run that way and this being the width that it is, like cable position and all this is factored into what the stand will actually test out at from a weight standpoint and what it's going to secure. I mean, this is made out of a solid billet, so this is going to have some flex to it. I mean, people who stand on this or stand on, older welded or cast stands are like, well, why does it move? Why is it moving under my feet? And the reality of it is it's because it's a solid billet. And that's going to have...
It's a flexible material. It's
Yeah.
extruded.
Yeah.
It's meant to bend a little bit and move back.
Yeah. But that's how you achieve the lightest weight with the maximum amount of strength. A weld or a cast is going to reach a certain point and then crack or break. It's going to give. But again, this was the balance between, how much. I think the goal was to get could we create, a sub 8 pound, a sub 7 pound stand. And then as you're designing the size of this and tweaking where the cables lay and where everything lays out, all the different support braces that are in here. I mean, where can you shave off weight and where can't you? And that's, where it goes into all the model testing of how this is set up from an engineering standpoint of what you can get away with and what you can't.
Yeah, sure.
And then it ends up being kind of what it is after that process. And then through field testing it, I mean, that was the other great thing is with Dan's experience being an R&D machinist, we could make up a bunch of samples of these and actually, go out and test them and use them. And that really led into, the design of this antler bracket and how it locks into a tree on the backside, This was not, the first design that was done on this. Based on the pitch, based on how these, these teeth are set up, that was all decided through creating prototypes, seeing how it would test out from a strength standpoint, how much material had to be placed back here, right where this bracket attaches here, and then going out and actually testing it onto a tree. How does it cam lock onto a tree? A lot of guys will tell you, well, I'll just take, a ratchet strap and put it on here. When you're using really lightweight materials like this, you ratchet strap stuff, you're going to bend it.
Yeah, it's not
you're
meant to
gonna-
have a force going like that.
Extra stress,
Yeah,
right?
it's not meant to have that force going back. So you really need to tighten your strap, set it, fold the stand up, cam lock it down, and pull that stand out. And the way that these teeth engage based on the distance that it runs from the antler bracket, this one doesn't have an antler bracket on it, that pitch that's right there, that really is what determines how well that's going to lock against a tree. So, you'll see there's other competitors out there that are creating products and they're doing demo videos online. And, during some of those demo videos, it's funny, sometimes they'll have difficulty setting it on trees, setting it on an angled tree that's going like this, setting it on a tree that's this big around, but you need to be offset to the side because the trunk is running this way. The reason why this stand and the antler bracket was designed in the way it was is so that you could set it on a tree that's running in this manner.
That was one of my biggest pet peeves. You try to roll that stand over, and
Get me that stand over there.
whether it's cam locked incorrectly or correctly, and you tighten your straps up, like it always seemed like the stand wanted to roll in a certain
Definitely.
way, and it's like, God, that's
Biggest
not
gripe.
where I want it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
You're
a lot of
sitting there
people ask,
cockeyed.
like, why don't you have an antler bracket that's just a V? So I actually hit, the engineers at the testing facility, when we were going back and forth in dialogue with them, they actually asked that question, why isn't this just shaped in a V, so it fits right around the round trunk? And I'm like, well, because that's not your typical scenario when you're out hunting. Your typical scenario is, if you're hunting, even if you're hunting field edge or any kind of fringe, every tree typically grows towards the light. So there's always some canter in a tree that you're in. And depending on which way you're facing, you actually might have to set up your stand offset
Right.
Yeah.
here.
And the thing is, too, a lot of guys will try just putting the stand on so that the angle's to the back.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the spot you need to be. You might be sticking out like a sore thumb off of the tree. So I want that stand so I can put it on the angle I need to be facing that deer so I can use the tree as my back cover. I typically fold the seat up like that, and I get in sideways in line with the tree, and the deer can look right through me as I'm part of the tree. But if you have that to the side because that's a better angle, then
Right.
you're going to fail.
And I think the combination of the lightweight and then you want to think about the double step. The first time these two things, when we had these prototypes in hand and we're actually out there hunting with them, when I'm on my top stick, I'm not balancing on one pedal on one foot. I've got my full foot across that double step, so I'm stable. I'm lineman's belted in, and then this tree stand is literally, I've got 2 fingers on it, and I'm watching where I believe deer are going to be coming from, and I can set this stand in there. And that direction where I want to face, I don't get to choose which way the tree is angling at that point. There's a spot where I got to be. And we've all been in that scenario where you're like, you climb up the tree and you're like, well, this isn't really exactly how I thought it was going to be. And, that goes into, your different adjustments. You're bringing this down so you can extend this out and get it to lean back depending on if that trunk is pitched backwards or pitched forward. So all that stuff is factored into how much travel you get out of this and again, the angle or the distance that runs between these points and these extreme points here as
So
it
then-
sits on the tree.
Just like the sticks, this antler shape was done in the same manner. It was figured out what we'd need to have to get the angled trees, and if it got any more angled than that, you couldn't get into it anyways. But this grips much like those. You get more gription in this than you do even in the cam lock, and this will lock right into the tree. When you cam lock, this locks more than that does. It locks right into the tree.
What about having the double button? I know there's a lot of guys that will only run a single strap. I've done it.
If I had my way, there would only be one button on there.
but it's ASTM.
Yeah, ASTM wants 2 buttons on there. And 2 buttons is great if you're going to leave a stand in the tree. But this isn't really designed for that. However, the problem I have with the second button isn't really that, if somebody wants it for safety, fine and stuff. The problem is if somebody misuses it. They go to cam lock it and they put the second one on there and they cam lock it and they cam lock it open. They could break the stand because it's too much strength. It's meant to cam lock up here. So that one would have to be put on after you cam lock it if you're going to use it.
Yeah. The other note people should know about that, similar to what Dan said, is if you're just taking both your straps and you're strapping them both tight against the tree as your secure point, I mean, you really need to put this strap on first, fold it up, slide it down the tree, lock it, then put this second strap on.
Correct.
But this is really a requirement of industry standards. When they do any of the engineering testing, they test it with both buckles on against the tree. That's what's required. And this is with anyone that's running tree stands. I mean, they have a system that they do this with. They'll load test it to max weight. Like this was load tested at 275, and then they take it up to 1.5 and load test it. And then they go up to 2 times, and then they'll run a cycle, a 10 to 15,000 cycle of maximum load just running on it as if someone was stepping up and down on
live
it.
loads, yeah.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, there's safety factors built into all. It doesn't matter if you're talking about 2x4s or any kind of engineering. There's some type of safety factor built into those capacities and ratings. I have to imagine it's pretty high on tree stands.
Yeah. So basically, the process by which it works is you build your product. So the initial, when we work with our engineer, they can model this, as a lot of people know who are in engineering, they can model this platform, seat, the tube, every single part that's in here, and they can run point stress testing in the model to see where the failure points are. So really, the advantage is that Dan, being in R&D machining, he can take a part, he can machine it to what he feels spec is, right? Adding material or taking material away in specific areas. Then we'll throw that back against the computer model to see, well, what is the computer model telling us? And then we'll actually take the part and we'll load test it, in the machine shop to see where the stress points are, and then we can put the parts together to actually get them tested, by an external company or in the field. Tree stands in general, you give them a weight rating. And then the ASTM standard is they'll take that weight rating, they do 1 at full weight, so you test it at your recommended weight, and then they'll go 2 times, and then they'll go 3 times, and then the seat is actually a single load test and then a 1.5 times load test. And then after that, the entire unit, I mean, this is all done from soup to nuts. You send them a stand, they assemble it per your specs and instructions and all your parts lists, and then they'll put it up, they'll test the whole unit, and then they go through that cycle testing. So
Way more in depth than what people probably realize.
yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of the other manufacturers are doing the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, and I physically took this and went through the testing for up to 300 pounds in the shop, and it passed everything. For 300-pound testing the same way they do. And then we decided to do 275 as a number, and they even said it would probably pass 300 hands down. Well, we know it would because we tested it to that.
Right.
But we just felt that it was a little flexible and stuff, and a guy would be a little uneasy, 300
Yeah,
pounds.
it's
And we're going to build a bigger one eventually anyways,
Yeah.
for a bigger guy.
So yeah, you prescribe to them what you want to do for weight testing, and they take you through it.
But if you're within that 275, I'd have no worries on this thing whatsoever. I literally put 900 pounds right here without it failing.
Damn.
and other things for people to think about that go into these designs. You know, if people, there's a lot of DIY guys out there, and you know, everyone has their own responsible for the things that they want to do on their own, but you know, the placement of these slots, the placement of where these buttons are in relationship to the distance of where it attaches here on the platform, all that factors into the force that you're generating against that tree when you cam lock it. So, you know, we get questions a lot from, you know, guys will be like, well, can I drill a hole in here to attach this, or, you know, can I drill into the platform? And we have to tell them, like, none of that stuff is, you know, tested as far as this whole unit works together. You have to be cautious of recommendations to modify people's products, you know, just open hand without understanding exactly how it's impacting the engineering of it. So we would much rather listen to that feedback and then go back to the lab and figure out and tweak and design stuff and change the way that the product is to, again, solve a problem or suit a need versus, you know, have people modify things.
Right.
Because I just, you know, it isn't a safe way of going about it.
Yeah, I see some of the mods out in the industry. It's scary.
Well, it's, you know,
Some of the stuff I see is downright dangerous. You know, from my background, you see some of it, and you think that is not going to end pretty. I mean, I even looked at some tree stands that are being manufactured by companies bigger than us, and you look at the stand and you go, that's going to fail right there. And eventually it does. I mean, we've called that plenty of times, and I mean, you wonder if they're even doing engineering. A lot of people are rushing out to market to build things right now, and they're doing it too fast. I mean, what you're looking at here is a development of about, 6 years, maybe even longer than that.
Yeah.
From concept to finish, it's more than 6 years.
well, I think the DIY stuff, the mods, like everybody gets a craze about, you know, doing something to make it, I guess, fit their needs. But what some people don't understand, and myself included, like I've had some static and dynamic classes like dating back to college, but like each design feature, like you said, Mario, there's you know, something might be under tension, something might be under compression, the way the loads and the way the stand cantilevers and like all the different load points on here. Like when you start to alter things,
and
it changes all that.
In that same mindset, you got to remember, we've already looked at this and took as much material out of here as we could
Right.
to make it still safe, but on the edge so that it's light.
Right.
Yeah.
So you start putting holes in there, and you're taking away from that, you know, what we've
Structural
already
integrity,
brought
yeah.
down to a
Yeah.
minimum.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's fantastic. Like I said, the shock factor, just picking this thing up. I'm like, whew.
Oh yeah.
It,
Yeah, I think people will be they're really surprised when they get it in hand how light it is.
yeah.
I
And
was very surprised.
I think they'll, for tree stand hunting, and I think the great example that you brought up, you know, even if you're a hunter that goes out twice a week, or you go out once a week and it's in the rut and you're setting up and taking down multiple times, or if you're a guy that has his own property and primarily hunts on private land and has set sands, but then looks for that moment where they got to move, that's what this stuff was made for. And it's light enough where it's not a burden. You know, we've done it, or you have friends, you know, they come. I remember last year a buddy of mine who shot a really nice 11-pointer, but he was moving his stand set up on the property that we have access to hunt to, and it was like those big old steel sticks, you know, and he's got a big old pile of them, and he's walking out of the woods.
Sounds like
I'm
a wind chime running through
why-
the woods.
You know, he's like, how do you guys carry your equipment in and out every night? And I'm like, well, that's why we made all this super light stuff, because at some point it becomes, it becomes a challenge to walk those distances for anyone when you're huffing that stuff around.
Yeah, you know, and I'm 54 years old now. I mean, it's getting harder every year.
34?
Yeah, that was right. Yeah. So I mean, there's a limited amount of time you can haul all that crap, and how far you can do it, and I just want to extend that as far as I can.
Yeah.
You know.
I think the other thing to note too is that obviously we talked about a lot of some of the complexities that go into designing any sort of product, right? Or some of the more minute features on these. But I think the other factor is just keep it simple. when you're making something and you're trying to solve a problem, the simple process, when you're hunting that buck and you're thinking about the situation and the setup, yeah, sometimes, when you're talking about all the nuance, it could get complicated, but in the end, there's like some simple guidelines about, safety, scent, sight, smell, all these factors that come into it and how you're setting up. And with these products, it kind of follows that same path. Why did you do this a certain way? Well, we could have made that fancier or made it cool if it clipped in or had something here that attached it this way, but that most likely is going to fail after multiple uses. It's more complicated. This is just simple. It sets on top of one another and I'm done. I can wrap a bungee cord on it, throw it on my back, and walk out.
It almost seems like some people are just gear junkies. They want things to be complicated so they can say it's cool.
Yes.
Where I just want it to be simple.
Yeah.
And maybe simple doesn't look cool, but it's functional and works well.
The thing that resonated most, I think, is when you said how people that use it are going to realize, like, this solves this issue, or you did this for this reason, and as they're using it, because I think that's the true testament of great engineering, is you don't even realize that they designed it for that reason, and then you're using it, and you're like, wow, this is much better than what, a different product is in the same
I've
type of
already
space.
gotten several messages from people that say they bought it just because they want to support what we're doing, but when they got it, they can't believe how good it is. Like, they didn't expect that. Of course it's good. We built it.
Right?
Do you think it's do you think it's a challenge for a product like this for people to purchase when they can't physically put their hands on it? Like at first, I know you mentioned like the long-term rollout.
But we've got such a great audience and big audience that I think we've got our initial people out there, so it goes pretty fast.
Yeah.
I think if somebody small was doing this, they'd have a hard time convincing somebody of the price tag or whatever. But there's a lot of that feedback about price and stuff, and people come around. We saw it with the sticks. Guys that told us they'd never pay that for a stick are now making orders once a month, the same guys. They just got to realize that they need it or that they want it. Yeah. And they got to realize what's into it. I'll get messages from guys being like, I know what aluminum is worth, and that aluminum stand is worth $30 because it's made out of aluminum. They had no idea what goes into machining that. And usually my comeback will be, well,
let me go make one.
Do you got a $300 bow? No, I got a $1,000 bow. Well, you can use a $300 bow to kill deer.
And they're buying a new bow every other year.
But that little percentage that I'd kill with this one over that one, I'd rather use this one.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how's that $1,000 bow that you have made? Well, it's a machined riser. Oh, much like my platform. So it's a machined riser, 2 cams and a string. Yeah. Not much different than my stand.
Right.
There's a lot of money that goes into this, and the profit margin isn't as high as what people think it is. It's honest to God, and me and Mario have talked about this several times. We wish we could sell this for $200 and make a decent profit where it could go, because if we could put it in everybody's hands.
Right.
And that's really what we want to do, is make hunting better for everybody. Yeah. So I wish I could make it for that price. I can't. There's no physical way. As a matter of fact, if I left all the features I had in there, it would be way more expensive than what it is now. We had to,
Mario the Buzzkiller.
Yeah, Mario the Buzzkiller. We had to take my antler tracks out of there, or my footprint tracks, and deer tracks. And I had a real expensive bow holder right here, and the feasibility of it is I don't think a lot of people would have used it, and the cost it would have added was pretty much, So, there is a point where maybe some of that stuff will come back in future models or stuff, but right now we're trying to get it affordable and give a person what he wants. And most guys are telling me they're going to buy a bow holder and put it here anyways on the side.
Right.
And I'm usually hanging my bow above me. So
I think the other clearing away feature that people will realize when they get this in their hands and they compare it to other very similar products that are on the market now, or ones that were just released this year, is the way that the tolerance was set up and designed around all the washers and how all the joints and the connection points come together.
Well,
because
you can put a microphone right up against this thing and try to get a sound out of it. Move every part, you won't get a sound. And that's not the case with every stand out there. And most stands, you got to tweak them to get them to that point.
Right. And anyone who's been in a tree stand, the tightness of how this folds down and goes up, the way this moves, you get a little creak here, you get a little creak there. And again, for guys that there's a lot of people that are super passionate about hunting whitetails and noise and just those little factors. Those are the things that, again, really set this apart. It makes literally no noise when moving any of the parts. It's super quiet, and again, all that has to do with these tolerances that were factored into all these joints that are being put together. Because like you mentioned earlier, before, if someone doesn't get this in hand and they're just looking at this and looking at another tree stand that's being manufactured out there, they're like, well, you got 2 cables, they're connected to the platform, you got an adjustment knob here, you got this. Everyone's looking for that that different widget that makes that product unique. And if you look at this stand, a lot of the way that the mechanics of this are set up, someone might look at it and go, well, what's different from this other stand? Well, the difference is the tolerance and how this stuff is put together and the materials that are used, which really make it quiet, strong, and a lot easier to use.
I think there's a giant confidence factor there too. Like we all know how our minds are in the deer woods, and having confidence a lot of times is the difference, if you find success or not. And having confidence in your equipment is it's a big freaking deal. I think just by people putting their hands on this, I know personally, I can instantly, it's like, okay, I know this thing's not going to make noise. I know it's strong. I know it's light. I feel confident with what I'm using.
Yeah. And that helps. I mean, the mental side of the hunting game is very similar to a lot of other things.
Oh, sure. Sure.
If you believe, more than likely it's going to happen.
Thanks for the rundown, man. Like I said, you hit the nail on the head in terms of it's tough until you actually lift it up and hold it. So if you're listening to this and you have a buddy that bought one, it's worth the drive to go meet up with them at a gas station and just put the darn thing in your hand and just see what we're talking about, because it's impressive.
Or just borrow it from him, and don't return his calls.
Yeah. Is that friend worth $625? Is that friendship worth that? No. Well, we certainly appreciate it. We'll link to your guys' site. I'm sure people could find you if they wanted to, anyways. But we'll certainly link there, and appreciate your time. And
and we got stands in stock. They're shipping daily, so sticks are shipping daily. All the stuff is in stock. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Got any questions? Contact us.